we're hugely overproducing people with kind of low-level academic qualifications that prepare them really for very little, except perhaps to become regulators. I mean, I do think, part of the kind of expansion of the bureaucratic class is that we produce people and we need to provide them with roles. And compliance officer, why are we strangling in regulation? I mean, I think it's at least part of the story, because we're overproducing people who are not capable of doing anything else.
Yeah, we've kind of changed the definition of success in a way.
Yeah, yeah. But meanwhile, we have huge shortages of very few people who are doing the kind of higher technical qualifications, level 4, level 5, and so on. Now, you could say that it's partly because there isn't sufficient demand from employers for those kinds of roles. I mean, it is a complex argument. I'm aware of that. So that it's creating a kind of an economic problem, and it's one of the reasons why the employers were so happy to have free movement from Europe to fill a lot of those sorts of higher technical roles. The Polish plumber. And if we want to, we have a massive shortage of skilled construction workers. We talk non-stop now about building more houses, but who's actually going to build them? I mean, they're going to have to relax the immigration rules again to bring in the skilled construction workers. Now, construction is a slightly special case because it's so cyclical. The incentive for a young man or woman to invest in kind of higher level construction skills is quite limited, but it is also the fault of our institutions, I think, that the incentives are so poor. So it's an economic problem, but it's also a social and political and cultural problem. So I think, going back to the famous Tony Blair speech, that we did achieve the 50% of school leavers going on to college, although it was skewed towards young women. I think it's more than a half of young women now go to university in the UK, and only a bit more than a third of young men. So there is a gender gap there. But the when 10 or 15% of people in your school, your class, your town, people go to university and you don't, who cares? I mean, it's the clever people have their special place, and that's fine. And the majority of people of average ability go on, work in the local offices or factories, and life goes on. But when 50% go, and you're not in that 50%, then it's if many people are going to start seeing themselves as kind of second-class citizens. It's going to, it's bad for their morale. Given how much of the culture focuses on that academic stream and that academic path to university, and I think that's what's happened. So, and not only that, not only have you kind of implicitly told nearly half of the population that they're second class, with the mass over expansion of higher education, you're also producing a hierarchy within the system, so that if you don't now get into a Russell Group university, the graduate income premium has now shrunk dramatically. I think it's more than a third of graduates are not in graduate employment, 10 years after graduating. So you're also creating a sort of lumpen intelligentsia, as it were, to use a kind of old Marxist phrase. And I do think there's a sort of connection between lots of kids, often perhaps from working class backgrounds, first in their family to go to university. They've worked hard, they've done what their parents and their teachers have said. They've worked hard and they've got there, and they've come out with a 2-1 from a not very good university in social sciences or humanities or whatever, and they're not moving into the high status, highly paid professional occupations that they thought they would be. They're in a 25 grand sort of back office job of some kind, probably about to be replaced by AI. And I suspect I don't know this for certain, but I think it's a reasonable assumption. It's such people that are the sort of shock troops, particularly of kind of left-wing populism, of the kind of, Corbynistas, the Bernie Sanders movement. I suspect we're often sort of, educated people in the sense that they'd been to university, but people without, and of course you've got the whole sort of problem with housing, the fact that they leave university with large debts. They don't have the kind of university experience that I had as a baby boomer, when you were still pretty well assured, when the kind of professional class was still expanding. This, of course, is one of the reasons for the sense that social mobility has slowed down, is the fact that there's less room at the top. I mean, we had a huge expansion of professional jobs, partly public sector professional jobs, all the teachers and university lecturers and doctors that were needed when the welfare state, the social state, was expanding in the 60s and 70s. That can't go on forever, and it probably is. There probably is still some expansion at the top, but it's much, much less than it was. So people sort of compare that sense that, particularly, if you'd gone to university in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you were kind of more or less guaranteed that relatively high status, relatively high paid job, and that ceased to be the case. So I think it's an economic problem, the overexpansion, the kind of head hand, the overvaluation of the kind of academic intelligence, and of course along with that goes the undervaluation of the people with practical capabilities and emotional intelligence, and perhaps that actually leads on to my current book, The Care Dilemma, Caring Enough in the Age of Sex Equality is the subtitle, and it's sort of building on the argument in Head, Hand, Heart, that the undervaluing of the domestic realm and the family, and the face-to-face care jobs in the public care economy, and to put it grandly, this is the sort of the third in my kind of Anywhere critique trilogy, because Anywhere people tend to be very public realm, very career, very professional, career success oriented people, and of course there's nothing wrong with that. I've been like that in my life. I understand and appreciate that, and we need ambitious, energetic, clever people to run institutions and come up with all the sort of the technical solutions that we need to solve our climate change and other problems. But in the process, I think we have again we've got things out of kilter. It's sort of, to put it more philosophically, it's a sort of tension between freedom and meaning. That I think the Anywhere liberalism tends towards a sense of freedom as lack of constraint, and it kind of, there's a sort of bias against the sort of obligations, the sort of long-term commitments that you need to make family life work well, but basically it's freedom versus the investment in the care that we say we want for the care that involves having the babies that we say we want. There is a fertility gap between the number of children young women are having and the number of children they say they want. I mean, it's quite a big gap. It would, if young women had the number of babies that they say they want, we'd be close to replacement. We'd be close to back up to kind of 2 to
really
1. Yeah,
that's interesting.
It's like half. So we're now 1.4, just 1.4. It's like half a child. Is the gap, and that half child would take us back up to 2. Now there are all sorts of reasons for being a bit sceptical about the surveys that ask people. Obviously, people's views change. You thought you wanted 2 children, you had 1, and you find you were happy with 1. Other things in your life kind of came along and made 2 tricky. You're not unhappy about it. Or you may end up childless. Now, a lot of people are unintentionally childless, but some people are intentionally childless. But anyway, it's freedom versus the investment that we say we want in having and looking after babies properly, looking after those disabled people of working age, and also, of course, the growing army of the elderly. 5 million people over 75 in the UK, 2.5 million over 85. That's a lot of people that need a lot of care, and we are not having the babies now that will be the young people that might look after them in 30 years' time. But I mean, I look more broadly at the various social ills that I think come from insufficient investment in the family and the domestic realm more broadly. And I talk about how the unstable family. I think people are not really aware of just what a mess our families are in this country, and we are international, aren't we? Certainly European outliers in the instability in family life, particularly in the bottom half of the income spectrum, which is perhaps one of the reasons why the public discourse does not recognise it enough, because actually the people that run our country and run the media and dominate our culture still come from relatively stable families. But much of the rest of the population doesn't. Nearly half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents at the age of 14. Nearly 25% of families are families with dependent children. Nearly 25% are single parent families, which is nearly double the average across the rest of Europe. It's about 13%, I think. And that alone, I think, is connected to a huge number of social problems. I mean, look, the criminal justice system is completely clogged up with people from unhappy, broken family backgrounds. Educational underperformance. The housing problem. For family breakup contributes enormously to the extra demand for housing that we're incapable of satisfying, et cetera, et cetera. Poverty. I mean, one of the reasons why we are a society with a relatively high degree of poverty, again by European standards anyway, and relatively high in inequality. The reason why we are one of the big countries, probably the most unequal in Europe, is a combination of having a very big financial sector and having a very big single parent population.
Do you run a business of any kind? Do you want 25% off up to 20 taxi rides? Well, if you sign up to Bulk Business with my promo code, that's exactly what you'll get. You don't have to use all 20 rides, and you can use it for your own business rides or for your employees. It couldn't be simpler. Follow the link in the description and use the code BB25OFF20 to get 25% off 20 taxi rides today. That's BB25OFF20. Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.